What's up, studs and studettes? We're in a little bit of an interesting position here as we release this as the beginning of April. That we're recording at the end of March, so hopefully there's some things in a more positive direction. But we have
we're in the middle of quarantine. Mike is masked. He has a white jumpsuit. No, he really doesn't. Because we're videoing this and you can watch.
I'm pumped right now because we are blessed to have our first studette guest. We're going to start doing one guest a month just to create some different opinions, different perspectives into what we talk about, because I think it'll just bring value and bring help for people like our guest today, Kimba Garcia, who owns a roofing restoration and remodeling company in the Dallas market. But she scaled her business from nothing to multiple seven figures and is now dealing with the unfortunate reality of how to get lean in this environment. And we're all going through it. You know, the unfortunate reality is we are all managing expenses, managing the situation, managing how we're running our business, how we're presenting our business, how we're marketing our business, how we're dealing with clients. Everything's different right now. And I think in some ways it's a good thing. I think a lot of us are going to learn lessons that will help sustain us longer because we're forced to make uncomfortable decisions right now. And so we brought Kimba on, who's going through that in a sense as well. And Kimba, give a quick 2-3 minute overview of you and what I might have missed.
No, that was actually pretty good, Mike, and thank y'all for having me on here. I'm super stoked to be the first studette.
I mean, it's pretty exciting. You know, we the studette movement.
It's a movement. It's a true movement.
I like it.
It came based on our initial network, like my wife and his wife and a few other people that were close to us. But then
it could have been like the Tiffany movement, and then it just they decided
both our wives' names are Tiffany.
Yeah, they decided not to exclude all women.
I saw that on his podcast. Yeah.
But yeah, so ultimately, you know, I think you bring an incredibly unique perspective because you scaled a business to what most people would hope to have at some point in their career pretty quickly. You're also a woman in a predominantly male environment who I would believe, and from all intents and purposes, looks like you're killing it. But you're also, regardless of success, dealing with some challenges right now from the current economic state. And I would hope that, you know, maybe you can share some best practices. And kind of where I want to go with the conversation is, what did you do to be lean initially? Like, how are you managing it? And then how did that change over the last 2 to 3 weeks? And then and we'll kind of talk about this together, but the best way to go about having those difficult conversations with employees, subs, and clients that normally you wouldn't want to have.
Yeah, I guess I'll back up to kind of where I was going into October. A lot of our business does come from storm restoration. So obviously going into the winter, kind of going through that initial lean out process is something that I like to do going in the winter too. And when I say that, it's kind of some stupid stuff like making sure that any CRMs, you know, you just set up some of these CRMs on auto pay, and next thing you know, you're paying thousands of dollars a month for shit you didn't even know you had.
True.
And just going through and checking, like, you know, just little things like that. But going into the winter, by little things like that, going through my books and just turning off things we didn't use and get, you know, just different services we didn't need, repurposing some things. I mean, I actually shaved off costs of $98,000 a year just by doing that. So I do want to encourage people straight out of the gate that there are probably a lot of places that you can lean out that you just haven't thought about yet. Just go through your account and start looking at every single tiny expense and just seeing.
That's a really good point, because when you start leaning out expenses like that, you know, just those CRM stuff and the easy auto pay stuff, that's literally profit that is coming back in. There's no, that's literally money going back into your pocket. And you said you did $98,000. That's a pretty nice bonus you just gave yourself for 2020.
Yeah. I mean, well, ideally, that was my motive at the time. Yes.
Fingers crossed.
But now, either way, that's still $98,000 a year that I have back in hand that I am leaner moving into this. So that's where I want to start is just really kicking off with those things that we probably forgot about, because that was a big deal for me.
And is that something that you sat down with your partner and walked through and decided as a team, or did you do it on your own or your bookkeeper? Because people right now who, you know, generally are uncomfortable with their own finances, like a lot of people in our industry struggle with the books and struggle with keeping up with those things. So maybe just give 1 or 2 tips on like how you started that process.
Yeah, I would love to. So I actually hate the books too, and I hate numbers. You've known me for a second, so you can probably tell I'm a little bit more of a creative and a relationship type person. I'm not one to sit down and crunch numbers and do books. So that's the good news, is it's actually really easy, depending on what bookkeeping system that you're using. And I know that's not the topic right now, so I'll make this super quick just so people understand what I did. But what I moved from QuickBooks, was my assistant was doing a lot of the data entry and things like that ourselves. And I just really couldn't get a clear picture of what was going on, because like, what the hell is accrual? And I mean, I can't read these reports. Don't mean shit to me as an entrepreneur. They probably do to my CPA, but I have no clue what's going on in that. So I actually moved my entire bookkeeping over to a program, and you probably see me talk about it in my group a lot, but it's called Bench. And for a company of my size, it's $500 a month. They do all of my bookkeeping, itemized. I mean, they link straight up to my bank account, and everything it automatically happens. And then everything within my dashboard is like color coordinated, and it's literally bookkeeping for dumbasses. I mean, it's color coordinated like for a second grader, but I can see exactly how much cash flow in a very simple chart, how much cash flow my business brings in and out every single week. So I see the weeks where we brought in significantly less than we've paid out, and then vice versa. And I'm able to go through and very simply see where every single penny of my money goes. And so I just started going through these transactions. I'm like, don't need that, cancel, don't need that, cancel. And by the time I added it up, it was 98 grand worth of stuff.
That's awesome. I mean, it's terrible, but awesome at the same time, because most people don't even think to do that until it's too late. And so you kind of had a structure and said, hey, yearly, or before shit goes down, I'm going to do this, because it's ultimately going to help your business. And, I was having a conversation with my wife this weekend, and it's kind of the same exact thing. She's like, you know what? And this is a good reality for us business owners. We need to try and be as lean as possible for as long as possible. Don't add on any expenses at all, because ultimately you need to get yourself financially stable to then be able to continue to try and grow your business. But once you can get yourself where you're making the money you need to make, that you want to make, and it's smart for a business owner, then you can start thinking about expanding. But a lot of people try and expand too fast, myself included, and you take on way too many expenses, and it's like, I'm working 70, 80, 90 hours a week, and I'm still making the same as when I was working 20, because I added on way too much stupid expense.
Yeah, and that's exactly where Robbie and I were at the other day. We set these really high revenue goals, and so far my company is 4 years old. It's been growing at 300% a year. And this year, with the revenue being so high, jumping up another 300%. I mean, and not that it's high, but I mean, it's good for where we are. But jumping up another 300% would be like astronomical at this stage in the game. And right, I just told him, I said, what, this year it's not about how much revenue we bring in; it's about how much profit we keep. Because with
most
the same
people
revenue that we ran,
understand that. That's such a smart thing to say. It's like they want more revenue, more revenue. It's like, no, you want more profit. You could make less money and bring home more money, and people don't understand that. That's very, very smart.
Exactly. And so, you got to consider right now, like keeping the same revenue marker and just leaning yourself out by 10 to 15%. That's going to raise your profit margin by that same 10 to 15%. So I really think we've got to go into 2020. I mean, we just have to adapt to what's going on. And now 2020 is not about like, hey, I'm going to brag about my revenue jump between 2019 and 20, which I kind of been doing. I'm like, oh, it's from this revenue to this revenue to this. And now it's like, no, I'm going to be that responsible business owner that starts bragging about my profit margin increases.
Right. Well, and the biggest thing too is, and I think you are experiencing that now as you go through these exercises, the things you implemented, 2 years ago, 18 months ago, worked for the environment, the ecosystem size you had at the time. But then as you scale 300%, the systems in places, the applications, the things just don't scale always with you. And when you're going that fast, it can be, like you said, those expenses that kind of just come along with you because you just moved on to the next thing and forgot about the last thing because it just stopped working for you. And I know how, like I have not known you very long, but I can tell you're a problem solver. So you don't you jump into the next solution to solve that current problem. And that's possible for a year or two. That's not possible for 10 to 20. Like sometimes you need to have that static growth year to create some systems and process, or even take a step back to get rid of some of those overheads. So, which I think is kind of where we all are right now. So kind of transitioning, okay, end of the year, you could do your typical let's look at all the individual things that we're reoccurringly paying for and get rid of as much of that as possible. Now we are in more of a, I don't want to call it a crisis mode, but we're kind of pre-crisis mode to an extent.
So you're in the building industry, home services industry. Is right now, current times, are you guys still getting the same amount of leads? Me as a digital like video marketer, like I'm slammed. Everybody wants video, so like it's great for me. But in the client service facing industry, how is your stuff going on right now? Are you still getting the same amount of leads? You still getting the same amount of contracts, all that kind of stuff?
So as far as my roofing side goes, I just want to kind of clarify that my company is kind of broken down into two divisions where we run our roofing side and then we have our restorations and renovations over here kind of separate, kind of two companies that are married to each other, if you will. Mm-hmm. So on my roofing side, as far as insurance claim work and stuff like that goes, it's not busy, but we're still pumping out roofs. We're still doing work, and we're still doing, it's low for this time of year, but it's because we haven't got our first hailstorm in DFW yet. Like by this time last year, I'd already had 2 hailstorms. So for the current situation, the current season, all that's running pretty normal. Now, to be transparent, I do have a canvassing door knocking team, and they're not able to go out right now. So I do expect a dip in the pipeline to be coming in about 2 to 3 weeks, just depending on how long. But as far as my in-house marketing is pretty on point. So we do still have leads coming in. I'm still able to help them out with some leads during this time. And then I train my salespeople on social media marketing and networking and different types of things. So they're strongly utilizing their other resources outside of door knocking. And so far being able to be successful with that. Of course, we're doing quarantine inspections where we FaceTime you and we're closing people over Zoom and we're docu-signing. But we are still doing those motions. Unfortunately, my renovation side is very dependent on the real estate market because our niche has been, up until this point, primarily fix and flip for investors. And then Robbie and I have started flipping houses ourselves as well. So I have a current flip house that I'm about a month away from completing and listing. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up buying that damn thing for myself at this point. But we'll see what happens. But that side of my company is so dependent on that investor niche. So right now, hard money lenders are not giving out any more money. They're not going to be funding any more projects, which makes that side of my company almost extinct after we're off of these last projects that we're on right now. So it definitely hits 50% of the company right there. Yeah.
So what are you doing? I guess this is kind of where we're leading into kind of with this episode, because there's a lot of people in your situation. What is your way to say, well, I've got a couple options. I can either try and ride it out with everything I got. I can try and go lean. I can try and downsize. I can try and double down on different service offerings. I can pivot. What is your plan to try and continue running a successful business during this time?
Well, it's been really hard. And one of the reasons that it's been really hard for me, and this is just me being really transparent and vulnerable, because I guess that's what we're here to do. My husband, who is also my business partner, is one of these, like, don't take the wind out of my sails. I'm going to fly straight through this, and almost didn't even want to acknowledge he's just going to sail right over the situation, to where I'm kind of like, no, we got to get in front of this, or it's going to fall, we're going to fall on our faces. And so we didn't get kind of on the same page with, hey, it's really time to plan and get in front of this thing until yesterday. And we spent from 7 o'clock in the morning till 9:30 at night pacing around the kitchen, game planning. I mean, I still have numbers written out on all over pieces of paper, all over every surface in my kitchen, and trying to figure out the best route. And that, at this stage in the game, that's what I want to encourage people to do. Is it's just like, hey man, get real about where you are, because we all think, oh, I can make it for 2 weeks. Okay, but what if it's not 2 weeks? You've got to be able to put your stress to the side. And it's hard because we all have kids. We're homeschooling now and all these different crazy things that have changed during this pandemic. And society is crazy. So it's so hard to be able to, even, people that are smart, intelligent, emotionally intelligent people, to be able to put all that on the back burner and run numbers is almost the last thing anybody's trying to do, but we have to. So start there and then go through, we went through our absolute have to expenses to make it. And then we figured out the least amount of revenue that we need to bring in, the least amount of contracts that we need to bring, worst case scenario kind of thing. Hey, in order for Peter to pay Paul and all of this, everything to wash out and float out in the end, this is what we have to achieve. And when we stop achieving that, that's whenever we're going to have to start, making those hard decisions on, are we still going to be able to keep as many crews as we have on right now? And my guys are my crews. I don't use a lot of sub crews right now. So that's a really difficult place for me to be, because I have 4 crews, and it's like, am I going to be able to, especially like with the flip niche out of the market, how am I going to keep 4 crews busy? I don't even know yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it is gearing up, and we have been having some difficult conversations, and I think it's important to be transparent with people at this point. I didn't ask for this. None of us asked for this, and none of us are in this alone. Not one single business owner out there is the only one having to go through these conversations. And I think it's just, for me personally, it's been having real candid conversations with my employees, and that started for me on Friday, including my sales team. And I sat down with everybody, and I encouraged them to, and I mean, again, this is just me being real. I encouraged them to do things like, hey, if your car payment will let you defer it, do that this month.
Mm-hmm.
Do things. I told them, the most important thing I want you to make sure that you have on hand is enough money for food for your family, and I want you to have enough money on hand for food for your family for 4 weeks. So if all you have right now is going to be your paycheck on Friday, and we don't know what next week looks like, then you save that, for example, you have $1,000, divide that by 4. That's your weekly food budget. Do not spend outside of that. Make sure your family is fed.
Well, that's really good that you're helping out not everybody has that, kind of budgeting idea and mindset. They see $1,000 and they're like, oh, I need to go buy this stuff to entertain myself. It's like, well, let's be smart, because we don't know how long stuff is going to last.
Yeah. So what I told them, grab 2 weeks of food right now, and then save your money in case it pushes out to 4. Be ready, have money on hand for another 2 weeks. And we just started having these, and I cried on the way to that meeting, because I hated having to have that. My sales team is usually thriving and they're all making money. And it's, it's not usually a conversation that we're having around the office where it's like, hey, are we all going to be able to feed our kids this month? I mean, what's going on? So I started there. And then I also started by telling my renovation guys, like, hey guys, this is where we're at with the real estate market right now. Y'all do we flip houses. That's what we do over here. I don't know what that's going to look like. I know we have 2 more weeks worth of work right now. And then we're going to stay as busy as we can. But if y'all want to start looking for something else, that will keep you busy. I mean, they're all really talented guys. I said, there's a big chance that we're going to have to move over to more of a sub-pay structure, just because we aren't going to have this influx of, the same volume of work for a second. So, I might still be able to hire y'all on a sub by sub kind of job by job basis. And that might work out better for them. If I can keep money coming in, they might actually be able to make more money on sub pay. And it will help me keep my costs more calculated per job and a tighter P&L. So I'm trying to be as positive as I can about it. But I've been really transparent, having those candid conversations with people, because that's really all we can do.
I commend you for sure, because I think there's a lot of employees out there right now that are scared because they're not getting transparency from their leadership. And I think that's scarier than just knowing exactly what they're thinking, because you can't make an educated decision without the education of what the situation is. So I commend you. And I think there's a lot of, if you're an employee, listen to this, and you're not getting that level of transparency from your leadership, go ask harder. Like go almost demand an answer, because you don't want to assume that they're planning on paying you for 4 weeks and they're assuming to pay you for 10 days. Right. So those are not easy conversations, but the fact that you've been thinking about it, but I think there's even an underlying lesson here is, this is the extreme version of this from a contingency perspective, but you need, as a business owner, or even as a human, as a head of household, you need to have like some contingency ideas in place. Like, what if you lose that top salesperson? What if you lose your job?
I've been saying this. I mean, me, I've been preaching, you people need to get on video. You need to get on digital, internet, whatever it may be. You need to figure out a what if plan. or you can't have all your eggs in one basket. You can't be in this only Facebook. That's the only way I market my business, because the what ifs. And this is a perfect example. I've been telling these gym owners that I know, you need to be doing digital video workouts every single day for free. And now all these people are scrambling trying to do it. And they're like, I'm losing every single client I have. I'm like, you should have been doing this. And I told you that.
But I mean, I guess, Kim, answer this question, and, I guess however you think is fit. But I mean, do you and Robbie spend time doing some contingency thinking, like as you've scaled, or have you kind of just said, hey, next problem, solve it. Hey, next problem, solve it. Hey, next problem, solve it. And kind of got to this point anyway? Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And the answer to that is both, because hopefully someday we can meet in person and you're going to see that my husband and I are night and day people. So that's what makes our dynamic really interesting. Because it's funny, he words it like this, and I find this really to be pretty accurate. But he says that I'm the brains and he's the muscles. And that's pretty much how
maybe we should have had him on, because we need another stud on here.
Yeah.
Then we could have three big studs and a studette.
Yeah, he fits the part too. But he's been one that he takes my processes and my workflows and my position agreements and my all of my things that I sit down and study, and I just stuff my brain with these books, and then I come up with things that work for us, and I build it into a plan, and then he goes in and executes on that plan. And Robbie's our top sales guy he is for roofing and for renovations. I can't lose my top sales guy because he's married to me, so it'd be really expensive for him to get out of this gig. So that's nice. But so to answer your question, a lot of both. Like, I definitely did some kind of, tactical planning along the way, but that didn't happen for me. Once we hit that 5 million mark in revenue, that's whenever the game changed. Kind of what you were talking about earlier, the same things that work here aren't going to work there.
Yeah.
And for me, that happened at the beginning of 2019. And that's whenever my SOP, I did have one, but my SOP got really formalized. My processes, all my agreements, my employee handbooks, all of those kinds of things just got really, really tightened up over just the last year. And so now I do have a plan, but what I'm really happy about right now is kind of getting back to that very lean, that very lean state in the business. Because
and I think
right
this is
now,
how we all started business. We had to be super lean, and then you get a little bit of money, and it's like, well, I can pay for that. I can pay for that. And it's like, I actually made more money when I started out because I had to be lean.
Yeah, and that's I like to use the example of the toothpaste. We're all real liberal with it until you're at the end and you have to go to the store and get a new tube, and then you can squeeze.
Dude, I literally
so
used that analogy in a talk I did to a group of people about time management, because like you do it with That's shampoo great. And toothpaste, right? Like you're like Costco brand, you're like 6 pumps into your hand, you drop some on the ground, doesn't matter, but then you get to the end and you're like, whoa. You're like banging it against the wall trying to get that last little bit out.
Yeah, so that's where I think people have to really go down to your base operating budget and only leave that in your operating account. Transfer out. It's almost like empty that tube of toothpaste out into another bottle and see what you can squeeze out one little bit at a time. And for some people, like Robbie, it really helped him whenever we actually went down and broke up into different sub accounts, because he wouldn't see that one lump sum in one account and get spend happy. It kind of helps breaking it up into a profit account, an operating account, a material account, a payroll account, like having different budgets for different things. I think will help business owners stay more lean, because it's going to be that same analogy in our heads of seeing the less amount of money there for that specific thing. And then stretching those dollars out as much as we can. While still, people, I also want to just encourage, while we're on this topic of leaning out, don't over lean out your marketing budget, because you still have to be able to have sales and things like that. And right now, with everybody being at home, having an online presence right now is gold. However, you can afford it.
And it's also really, really cheap right now.
Yeah, it's so cheap
if you're
right now.
Hearing this, go pay for some sort of digital advertising, because it's like it was back in 2016 when I was getting 60 to 1 ROI on my ads. So go do that. That's secret tip today.
That's super reassuring to hear, because that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, man, for all of us that can lean out push marketing, push branding, focus this time on building relationships, like showing up to your socials and just cheering people up. Like, people are sad. People are stressed. Like, show up and just be that sense of light and educate them on your specialty, because people are just looking for things to watch and things to do. So, I was telling, my husband is such a genius on building houses from the ground up. And I told him, I'm like, man, you just need to go on a live and just explain to people, like, what the hell drip edge even is. And what it even does.
He needs to do it with like Legos too, so they have something to watch and understand. Like, this is what the foundation is and why you do it and why you do it this way. And if you have a weak foundation with these little Lego blocks, this is what's going to happen. Like, you can be so creative and unique, and it's going to grab a bunch of attention, and you're going to get way more business when people are ready to come out of apocalyptic hiding.
All right, so let's touch on the concept of, as we're leaning out, those difficult conversations that we have to have with employees, subs, like those crews you have, because, look, you're affecting a lot of people when you have to let somebody go or downsize in some way, shape, or form. So obviously, Kimba, I think we've all at some point had to let an employee go one way or another. Mm-hmm. But I guess, is there a best practice you use for that? Any type of system you have in place, or like, is it just a, hey, I'm sitting here crying and you're crying, we're both crying, and this is what it is?
I don't cry in front of them, but I definitely do when I leave. Most cases, they're having a couple times I've celebrated. I really think that comes down to it. I mean, to answer your question in a normal situation and to make it pretty quick, since that's not where we are right now, I typically have a email write-up process. So if, there's some reason that, and I say write-up, like, I don't try to be people's principal, but if something happens and I just felt like it was, relatively unforgivable or cost somebody or something in some way, I'll have a conversation with somebody, and then I'll basically put that in an email. Like, per our conversation today, we went over this, but it's really professional, and I never personally attack anybody during that time. It's just, I will focus on the behavior that I didn't like or the action that I didn't like, but I will never say, you are such a piece of shit. I might say what you just did was pretty shitty, but I will never say you are a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And things like that, and then to follow it up with an email. So the process at my company is, at the third email, we have to sit down and have a conversation about if this is still a good fit. So I want to kind of roll that into right now, because being a good fit and I'm having to check out, I'm a little humanitarian person. So I also sometimes have to put on my business hat and make these hard business decisions. And I'll get back around to why saving your business is the most important part. I do want to talk about that a little bit. But to get back to what I was saying, so whenever we're having to have these conversations with people, like, I think it's important to just to word it that way. Like, is this still a good fit is my famous last words, because that could be for so many different reasons. The reason that this might not be a good fit for a job to not be a good fit, it's either not a good fit for the employee. Like, they're either not happy in their role and they're not fulfilling their job duties because they're not happy in their role. Maybe we have them in a job that they're just not meant for. You can't put a production guy in a sales role. He's going to hate his life, and vice versa. So sometimes it's like, hey, what's going on? Is this just not a good fit? But sometimes it's like, hey, this is not a good fit for the budget, and continuing to even have this position exist in the company might be, it's a really hard decision to have to make to scrape. I would much rather scrape a CRM than I would a position, but sometimes you have to have that talk. And so I think it's important to be transparent, honest. I think it's amazing if you do have somebody that you have to let go that actually is really good at their job and you just can't afford to pay them. I think a heads up is however much of a heads up that you can give somebody right now is appropriate. Like you were saying, if that's 10 days, let them know, hey, I'm paying you for the next 10 days. And then, we're going to and then try to help them come up with another personal alternative if that's all that you can do, or pay them for 2 weeks. But let people know what to expect, and let them know in a way that, hey, this is a decision that I'm having to make, because at the end of the day, if we sink the boat, there's not a boat left to rebuild. And I want to have something to rebuild, especially in the construction base. We're so open for lawsuits. You can't keep people working that you can't pay. You'll get sued.
Yeah, it's for sure.
It's simple. So you have to be able to see a couple weeks ahead of the game and know, like, hey, my draws, my cash reserve, my lines of credit, whatever the case may be, are gonna dry up, and I'm only gonna be able to pay these people for this set amount of time, and then let them know that. in a real honest way. And then, like I said, if they're a really good employee and you can help, for lack of a better term, rehome them, like if you know somebody hiring, or you can put in a good referral and leave them with that. Like, hey, I will pay you for 2 more weeks. I will keep my eye open for any position I think that you're a good fit for. And if you do find something else, I will write you an amazing referral to tack to your resume. You're more than welcome to use me as a reference, just whatever you can do on that personal level to limit the blow. But I think hiding from that, from a leader standpoint, and not being transparent is what's going to make people want to burn your house down by the time that it all comes down, and they're not going to respect you. And then you have no chance of getting that great worker back if your business does make a good comeback.
Well, and the equation that I always walk people through when they're going through like good, bad, or indifferent employee is, what is the risk if I keep them for 12 more months, and what is the risk if I don't? And if you can run that equation and the risk in keeping them is greater than getting rid of them, it becomes a business decision. And if you present it to them, like you said, transparently, whether they're upset or not, which, I mean, some people will, some people won't, but they'll understand and they'll get over it, and they'll appreciate your honesty and transparency and like the legitimacy behind the decision. Because to your point, you can't sink the whole ship to save one person, good, bad, or indifferent. Because you'll get through this. We're going to get through this season. Like you said, build the relationships, get in front of people, get rid of the waste, get as lean as you can. And we're gonna survive this. And I think we're gonna have a phenomenal second half of the year. Because people want to spend money. Like, the government's trying to pump as much into the environment in the market as they can, right? So there's gonna be money to be spent on the back end of this. It's how do we get there and can operate as effectively as possible? Because if you dry up all of your reserves, all of your line of credits, everything, then you can't catapult on the other side of this. You're going to be dragging that for the rest of the year. And that's just, then you're stressed out for potentially years, not even the rest of this year. And so I think you made some really great points around that part of it, where it comes down to get as lean as you can, get rid of as much as you can, operate as efficiently as you can, and be in the best place on the other side of this to operate as effectively and bounce back as quick as possible, and potentially hire some of those employees back because you gave them honest feedback as to why it all happened to begin with.
Definitely.
I agree.
Ryan, you have brought so much value.
Hey, I just agree with people.
This is great.
Well, you know what value I'm going to provide? Kimba, I officially declare you a studette, because you brought some fire on this.
It was great. No, I mean, Kim, you have any final thoughts on everything that you guys are going through right now, or something that the listeners can take back to their own businesses and implement?
I would just say, like, just, keep your head up high. It's really hard to be in a position where I know a lot of entrepreneurs like myself, like you guys, have worked our asses off to build where we've built, and this does feel like kind of a kick in the nuts a little bit. So I just want to share the positivity that I'm taking away from my current situation. And that
does it feel like a kick in the nuts? Do you know?
I don't know, because I don't have any nuts. I'm a studette.
From what you hear, it sounds like a real punch in the dick. But
it sounds like a similar experience. Like, you just want to like grab your stomach and fall on the ground. Yeah. That's how I feel.
All right.
Fair enough. Yeah. So it looks like the same reaction. Maybe I should have said that. Anyway, but I am excited about being able to, like, me individually as a person and as a business owner and as a manager of people, I've grown a lot in the last 4 years, and I've learned a lot. And I'm not sure, for any entrepreneur out there, if you can just ask yourself, like, hey, if I could scrape all the way down to the bottom and rebuild this thing all over again, how many things would I do different? Because I would do almost everything different. I would make everything more efficient. I would make everything more clear. I would have had these same candid conversations with employees that I had 3 years ago when I just didn't know how to have this kind of conversation yet. And so there is going to be so much hope for the future, because even if you have to scale back, even if, like we were talking about earlier, that revenue is still not going to be, it's not going to quadruple next year or whatever you were trying to do. There is going to be some value in the rebuilding, because I promise y'all one thing, what I'm rebuilding is going to be so much more profitable and efficient than what I built the first time, because I just know so much more. So for everybody out there, stay in tune to this. I love y'all's podcast. I've listened to multiple of them.
Every single
Always
one.
Awesome. Probably every single one. I hate to promise that, and I missed one, but I do listen to y'all's podcast. I think that it brings so much value. And so, stay tuned into things like this and always be learning, because on the next rebuild cycle, you're going to be able to do it so much better the next time around.
I agree. Once again, I'm here to agree because it's correct stuff.
Kimba, thank you.
That's your role.
Yes.
That's what you came for.
I'm here just so I don't get
I
fined.
surround myself with yes people. Just
Yeah, I like it.
No, but seriously, Kimba, thank
Even
you so
when I
much.
disagree with people, I try to start with yes.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
like, yes. I hear you.
but I appreciate. I'm sure a lot of the audience does as well. And I mean, it's just the reality situation is the strong will survive and they'll thrive, and the people who do nothing or hide from it are going to struggle. And that's the reality of the situation. It sounds like you're taking it head on, and people will survive. The market's going to come back around, and the people who are working hard to make it happen will continue to win. So, thank you so much, Kimba, and
thanks for having
appreciate
me.
it, everybody. And Ryan, any closing yeses?
We'll see you next time on the Big Stud Sales Podcast.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.